My name is Elias Mercer, and the story I am about to tell you is the one that broke me, burned me, drowned me, and brought me face to face with God in a way I never thought possible. I was born in 1960 in Luxor, Egypt, though my parents were British. My father worked in the diplomatic service, and my mother carried the soft but steady voice of Anglican faith inside our home. My earliest memories are not of playgrounds or green fields, but of towering stones, broken statues, and the whisper of wind passing through ruins that had stood for thousands of years. Our house stood not far from the Nile, and on nights when I could not sleep I would walk barefoot through the sand and sit at the edge of Karnak Temple. The smell of the dust and incense from nearby homes would cling to my skin, and even as a child I thought the ruins were alive. I thought if I pressed my ear close enough to the stone it would speak. My mother taught me to pray, but my father told me prayers were for men who feared the dark. He believed only in reason and science. I grew up with that tug-of-war inside me, one hand pulling me to faith, the other to disbelief. When I went off to Oxford to study archaeology, I chose my father's side. I buried myself in books about pharaohs and ancient trade routes, and I told myself the Bible was only another set of myths, stories borrowed from older traditions. By the time I was in my 40s, I had stopped calling myself a Christian. I would tell my colleagues I was an archaeologist of bones, not of souls. I laughed when students brought up miracles or prophecy, but secretly, tucked inside the bottom drawer of my desk, I kept my childhood Bible. In its pages I had pressed dried reeds from the Nile, fragile brown things that had survived decades just as I had. I told myself it was only nostalgia, but sometimes in the dead of night I would open those pages and feel something stir that I did not want to name. For most of my career I hunted for proof that would close the book on faith. I was convinced that Christianity had been stitched together from Egyptian rituals, Coptic traditions, and old myths. I chased evidence with an obsession that left me cold inside. I spent months in the desert under burning suns, breathing dust, scribbling notes about inscriptions that most of the world would never read. I told myself I was preserving history, but the truth was I wanted to disprove God. I wanted to bury him once and for all under stones and sand. That drive led me to Saqqara in 2023. I was 63 years old and tired, but still restless. There were rumors of a chamber buried beneath collapsed limestone, a chamber that some believed might have been used by early Christian sects who had fled into Egypt after the crucifixion. Most scholars laughed it off, but I did not. I felt something pull me there, though I would never have admitted it then. I descended into that shaft with a flashlight in my hand, the smell of burnt myrrh and roses suddenly in the air. The ground gave way beneath my feet and I fell into black water that burned and drowned me at the same time. My last thought before I lost consciousness was that the stones I had spent my life chasing had finally claimed me. The moment the black water closed over me, I thought death would be nothing but silence. I expected the kind of void my father always described, an end like a candle snuffed out. But that is not what I found. At first there was a weight pressing against my chest, so heavy I thought my ribs would splinter. My lungs screamed for air, but instead of water filling me, it was as if fire poured through my throat. I tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed. Then everything went still. My body stopped thrashing. It was as if something had released me from flesh, and I was falling deeper than any cavern I had ever explored. The darkness was not empty. It had a presence, a density that wrapped around me like wet cloth. I could smell it. That is the part one cannot explain. It was the stench of sulfur mixed with the sweet smoke of incense, the very scent of the temples where I once sat as a boy. Except now it was rotten, spoiled, like holy things left too long in the sun. I opened my eyes, or maybe it was something deeper than eyes, and I saw that the dark was alive. Shadows stretched and twisted. Shapes moved as if they were waiting for me. Then came the sound. It began as a low moan, then grew into 1,000 voices crying at once. The cries were not distant. They pressed against me from every side. I turned, but no matter which way I looked, I saw faces. Endless faces. Some were contorted in terror, some in rage, some in blank despair. Their mouths opened and closed, but their words melted into one long scream. It was like being dropped into the center of a choir that sang only agony. I realized I was moving downward. Not falling, not flying, but being pulled. The darkness had gravity. It tugged at me, dragging me into a cavern where the air shimmered like heat rising from sand. The ground beneath me was not solid stone but shifting grains glowing red, as if the desert itself had been set ablaze. Rivers of boiling sand flowed around jagged black rocks, and every wave of that molten earth carried human forms. I saw arms reaching up before sinking again, mouths gaping in silent begging. And then I saw them, figures I knew. I tried to deny it, but their faces glowed in the red light. Colleagues I had mocked, rivals I had debated in lecture halls, men and women I once drank with after digs in Cairo. Their eyes caught mine as if accusing me of being one of them, one who lived without hope. Some called my name, their lips moving, their voices swallowed by the roar of fire. The terror that took me then is something I cannot measure. I was not looking at strangers. I was looking at my own reflection in them, people who had chased knowledge but lost truth. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The ground shifted and swallowed me to the knees. The burning sand clung to me like acid, eating through my skin. I cried out, but my voice was a whisper compared to the storm around me. I knew then I had crossed a line. This was not a dream. This was not imagination. This was hell, and I was inside it. The deeper I was pulled, the more the darkness revealed itself as a place, not just a void. Caverns stretched wider than cathedrals, their ceilings jagged like broken teeth. Flames did not rise from wood or coal but from cracks in the ground itself, spurting out in sudden bursts that lit up grotesque shapes. And in those bursts of light I saw the ones I could never have imagined being here. I saw my father first. His eyes were clouded white, his mouth wide but sewn shut with wires glowing red. He was on his knees, straining to speak, straining to tell me something, but all that came out was the hiss of air escaping through torn lips. Around him were shelves of books that crumbled to ash when he touched them. He kept grabbing new ones, desperate to read, but every word dissolved before he could take it in. My stomach twisted. This was the man who told me faith was weakness. He had mocked my mother's prayers until her voice went quiet. And here he was, trapped in silence with only ashes to feed his hunger for truth. Then I saw my mother. She was not screaming like the others. She was kneeling in chains, her head bowed, her lips moving in prayer even as shadows gagged her. Tears ran down her face, but her eyes glowed with something different, something that was not destroyed. I wanted to run to her, but the ground shifted, pulling me toward another vision. I saw colleagues, men and women who had argued with me in dusty lecture halls. One professor I had admired was gnawing at stone tablets as if they were food, his teeth breaking and bleeding as he tried to devour words that would never satisfy him. Another rival of mine, a man who prided himself on disproving miracles, was stretched across a burning scroll, his skin fused to it, screaming as it wrapped tighter and tighter around him. The horrors were not random. They were mirrors of their obsessions, their arrogance turned to chains. And as I watched, I realized I was not different. The ground split beneath me and skeletal hands erupted, pulling me down. My own tools appeared, brushes, chisels, notebooks, but they turned to knives and hooks, cutting into my skin. Every discovery I had ever made now mocked me. I screamed as my body was dragged across jagged rocks, torn open, my blood sinking into the fiery sand. Demons swarmed, laughing with voices that echoed like thunder. One of them held up something in the distance. At first I thought it was another relic from the ruins, but as it glowed, I felt a terror deeper than any pain. It was a fragment of wood, stained dark, bound with ancient cords that bore hieroglyphs etched in fire. And in that moment I knew what it was. It was part of a cross. Not a cross carved for a pharaoh or an idol, but a piece that carried the blood of Jesus himself. I had spent my life mocking the very idea, chasing fragments of pottery while this truth had been waiting. The demons thrust it before me, mocking, "You searched for bones but missed the living word. You wanted relics, and here is the relic you refused to see." The weight of their words crushed me. I fell to my knees, the sand eating through my skin, the air like acid in my throat. All my pride, all my arrogance, all the years I had laughed at faith, they rose before me like a mountain I could not climb. I tried to deny it, but the relic burned into my eyes. I saw flashes of Egypt sheltering something sacred, whispers of believers fleeing here after the crucifixion, carrying pieces of his story into the desert where I had been born. I realized I had been living on top of holy ground my whole life, yet I had blinded myself. My chest heaved with sobs I could not control. I shouted until my voice broke, "God, forgive me. I mocked you. I denied you. I thought myself wise, but I was a fool. Please, do not leave me here." The screams around me swallowed my words. My own body felt like it was breaking apart. My skin peeled, my bones ached as if fire was seeping into the marrow. The demons clawed at me, dragging me lower, chanting that there was no hope. And for a moment I believed them. I believed I was lost forever. That was the moment when hope itself seemed to die in me. Every face of those I loved was twisted in pain. Every discovery I had ever made turned to ash. I thought of my mother's Bible with the Nile reeds pressed inside, the one I had kept hidden out of shame. I thought of her prayers and realized she had prayed for this very moment, when I would finally break. In that breaking, I understood, knowledge had never saved me, and it never would. Just when I believed there was no hope left, the ground beneath me split open and a light unlike anything I had ever seen tore through the darkness. It was not the flicker of fire or the glow of molten rock. It was alive. It cut through the screams, silenced the demons, and for the first time since I had fallen I could breathe. The relic the demons had mocked me with shook in their hands, the hieroglyphs melting away as if fire itself bowed to something greater. From the light stepped Jesus. Not the distant figure I had studied in paintings, not the character of dusty texts I had mocked in lecture halls. He was real, burning with a holiness that was both terrifying and gentle. His eyes pierced through me, and in them I saw everything I had ever done. Every lie, every laugh at the expense of believers, every moment I had chosen pride over humility. I should have run, but I could not move. He reached toward the relic, and when his hand touched it, it changed. The cords turned to threads of gold, the bloodstains shone like rubies, and it radiated warmth instead of dread. The demons shrieked and scattered like smoke in the wind. The chains that bound me melted away. For the first time I felt weight lift from my soul. I fell to the ground weeping, unable to speak. Jesus did not need words. His presence spoke to the deepest place in me. "You were blind, but I have opened your eyes." The fire of hell could not touch me anymore. His light filled every shadow. I thought I would die again in that brightness, but instead I lived. The light carried me upward, away from the screams, but inside me there was still a war. My mind argued it was impossible, that I had hallucinated from lack of oxygen, that no relic of Jesus could exist in Egypt. Yet my heart burned with a truth I could not deny. I felt the scars of my pride like open wounds, and shame gripped me as tightly as any chain had. How could I, who mocked believers, now claim to have seen him? Still, the presence of Jesus did not fade. Even as doubt gnawed at me, his light pressed deeper into me, reminding me that forgiveness was not earned but given. I trembled between despair and hope, caught between the man I had been and the man I was being called to become. For the first time in my life, I longed to believe. When I opened my eyes again, I was choking on lime water, my body burning, my skin raw. I was back in the cavern, but voices shouted above me, and strong hands pulled me up. My young Egyptian assistant had dragged me out, his own arms blistered from the same poison that had nearly killed me. They rushed me to Cairo, and doctors told me it was a miracle I survived. But I knew it was more than that. I could not return to my old life. The relic I saw, the words I heard, the light that saved me, it all demanded something new. I laid down the pride of an academic chasing bones and took up the burden of telling the truth I once denied. My quest was no longer to disprove but to reveal, not to bury God but to point to him in the sands I had spent my life digging. I never went back to the man I was before that day in Saqqara. The scars on my skin healed slowly, but the scars on my soul were far deeper, and yet they became the proof that I had been changed. I walked away from positions and accolades I once dreamed about. The hunger to be respected as a skeptic, as a man who could explain away faith with clever words, died the moment I saw hell and the moment I saw Jesus. Now I live differently. I do not stand in lecture halls trying to outsmart students. I speak in smaller rooms, in churches, in homes, sometimes even in the open desert. I tell them what I saw. Some believe, some laugh, but I do not waver, because I know. I know the fire of hell is real. I know the relic of Christ's suffering lies hidden in the folds of Egypt's history. And I know the Savior is alive, greater than any ruin, brighter than any torch in the darkness. There is peace in me now, not the peace of silence or ignorance, but the peace of knowing I was pulled from the pit. I wake each morning with a memory of that light and with gratitude that I was given another chance. My life was once about stones, about dead things. Now it is about the living presence of God. I went searching for fragments of history, but instead God gave me a future.